Hi, my friends. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State, my daily TV broadcast of the news of the day. And boy, today is great. Donald Trump is hitting it on all cylinders. You go, Donald. This is like this week is kind of the opening of his administration. He's keeping every campaign promise and barreling ahead with a tremendous success record and leaving Congress behind in the dust. Today, he told UNESCO to go to hell. UNESCO stands for UN Cultural, Scientific, and Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. That's right. And it's often confused with UNICEF, which is the children funds, which it should not be. UNICEF is relatively impartial, pro-Western, not at all crazy in terms of the Palestinians. And the reason is that they don't get money from the UN. They get most of their money from the public. And therefore they have to be acceptable and attractive, and they do a fine job. UNESCO is a bunch of horse thieves. The organization is controlled by the extreme left throughout the world, third world dictatorships. They just recently admitted Palestine as a member of UNESCO. Where the hell is Palestine? What country is that? And the United States, in retaliation, stopped paying dues, and we now owe them $500 million in back dues. Well, Trump quit UNESCO, told them to stuff it for the $500 million that we're not paying, and they can get along without us. The breaking point was that just recently the UNESCO declared the Temple Mount to be a Palestinian World Heritage Site, meaning putting it under Palestinian jurisdiction. And their whole approach has been virulently anti-Israel and using the facade of protecting the world's cultural institutions to in fact pursue an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel agenda. Well, thank God, Trump just cut him loose. And I think that may presage a further step that I think Trump is going to take. I think that over the next year or so, he's going to say that unless the UN repeals its resolution calling Zionism a form of racism and condemning Israel as an imperialist power, he may suspend U.S. payment of dues to the UN as well. But this is a bold first step and really, really welcome. We were hoping that Bush would do that, but he didn't have the courage, but Trump sure does. Now today, Obamacare died. They haven't buried it yet, but it's dead. As surely as if it were repealed by the Congress 2 months ago. I've been teeing this up for you in broadcasts until today. And by the way, please share this with people, because I don't think people realize that. The newspapers aren't reporting it properly. They're saying some complicated executive order. In fact, it's a knife in the heart of Obamacare. Trump killed Obamacare today. What he did was that he permitted insurance policies to be offered to the public without having that extensive list of services that Obamacare required. Maternity benefits even for men, sex change operations, substance abuse therapy, psychological counseling, chiropractic, anything you can think of, he put in there. And as a result, because all the special interests wanted it in passing the bill, and as a result, the premiums on Obamacare are out of sight, and so are the deductibles, even beyond the capacity of the tax credits to make it affordable to people. So what Ted Cruz was pushing for in the Senate was to say that plans could be set up outside of Obamacare without that list of specifications, as long as there were some plans that had everything in it. And Cruz's amendment was rejected by the Senate, but now Trump in effect has unilaterally ordered it as an executive order. The legal justification isn't that important, but one part of it is that he was saying that any trade group or union or fraternal order could set up its own health insurance policy, and that, under Obamacare law, would not have to have all these bells and whistles. And he also said that you can have a short-term health insurance program. At the moment, short-term means 12 weeks. He's extending it to a year, and undoubtedly will keep extending it and make it permanent. And that doesn't have to have all of this stuff. So people will now be able to choose between Obamacare, where the premiums will be high and the deductibles insane and the tax credits inadequate, or a lower cost, purely catastrophic policy tailored to what they want and what needs they have to be protected from. And people will flock to the new policies. The new policies will also be permitted to be issued across state lines, so competition will further drive down the costs. And then, as if to put the final nails in the coffin of Obamacare, he said that he's not going to enforce the requirement that you have to have health insurance. Last year, the IRS wouldn't even let you submit a 1040 form without the health insurance data included. They wouldn't accept it. They'd mail it back to you. Now IRS is accepting it and is not penalizing anyone for not having insurance. And finally, Trump is not going to bail out these insurance companies from the deficits that they're running, and is going to make them eat it. And more of these insurers will pull out of Obamacare. Okay, you're asking, what happens to the people who have pre-existing conditions that are so expensive that they can't get insurance in the private sector because they can't afford it, and they're reliant on Obamacare for it? And the answer to that is the same program that protects them now under Obamacare will continue, which is PCIP, Pre-Existing Conditions Insurance Program, that says that if you're above a certain threshold in medical bills, the federal government will pay everything for you, basically as if you're on Medicare. And it's a fund that now administers care to 132,000 Americans and costs about $4 billion a year. Interestingly enough, about 5% of those folks account for more than half of the money. Very expensive conditions. But those will still be covered. And the other good parts of Obamacare will continue. Kids covered till 26, no dropping people because they're sick or raising their premiums, and no ban on you have to cover someone even with pre-existing conditions. The good stuff that's at the core of the Obamacare reforms. But Obamacare is now dead. It's a matter of time until the corpse is buried. See, Obamacare does not have permanent subscribers. Every year it has to pray that it gets more and more people to be conned into participating. And it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme. They're relying on the revenues and the premiums from these new, young, healthy people that are coming in to subsidize the excess costs of the older and sicker people who were already in the program. As a result of all of this, Obama has succeeded in persuading 12,200,000 people to enroll in Obamacare. Now, that's not a huge amount. Medicaid has 70 million. Policies provided through your employer are 151 million. Childhood health insurance, CHIP, is 10 million. But Obamacare is 12. But I'll bet you that by February or March, it's well below 10. They have to re-enroll. And first of all the negative publicity about Obamacare. Secondly, Trump has slashed all of the outreach money. He's no longer paying these public employees called navigators to go around drumming up business for Obamacare. And I think that this program is on its way into a death spiral. And I think today was the day that Trump really kept that campaign promise. So I am in love with Donald Trump today.
Great. So is everyone else. Well, Leroy Kernew wants to know, what do you think we should do about North Korea?
Well, I think that what Trump has been doing is scaring the hell out of North Korea. He's been ratcheting up the rhetoric. He said this is the calm before the storm when he met with his military command. And if you read The Art of the Deal, that's how he does it. He comes in with bluster and threat and the ultimate issue, and then gradually he moves it back to a more reasonable negotiating position. And that, interestingly enough, is what Kim Jong-un does. First he says, I'll blow up the world. Then he says, I'll blow up America. Then he says, I'll blow up South Korea. Then he says, okay, I'll just blow up Guam. And then he says, well, maybe I won't. I'll just overfly Japan with missiles. And I think that Trump is calling his bluff and is being very effective in doing so. And while he's doing that, he's strangling North Korea, because he's enforcing the sanctions that say that anybody that does business with North Korea, strangling North Korea. He says anybody that does business with North Korea cannot do business with the United States, cannot use our banking system, cannot have any commercial transactions in America. And that is slowly strangling the ability of North Korea to compete. Yesterday, China warned Trump against excessive rhetoric about North Korea. That means it's working. It's getting under their skin.
Well, Sam Hunt wants to know, do you think there will be a lawsuit against President Trump's executive order that allow insurance companies to sell across state lines?
Yeah, sure there'll be. The liberal groups will sue to overturn every one of Trump's executive orders. But I think it'll easily be sustained, if not in the liberal lower courts, certainly in the higher courts. His policy of permitting people to get whatever insurance they want is based on two exceptions that are in the Obamacare statute. One of the exceptions says that that an association, a fraternal group, kind of like charter groups used to be, can get a health insurance program that doesn't have to meet those specs. And the other says that you can have a short-term program, duration defined by the president, that doesn't have to. And it used to be a year. Obama cut it to 12 weeks. Now Trump is expanding it to a year and probably will continue to roll it over. And the president has the authority to tell the IRS what to prioritize in its enforcement, to say I'm more interested in people with huge offshore accounts or drug dealers who are laundering money, and I want them to be given enforcement priority, not the poor schnook that hasn't bought a health insurance policy. And I think the more he does that, the better he's going to be. Now, normally a president tries to shield the member of his party from having to cast controversial and difficult votes, and they try to protect them. And Trump isn't doing that. Trump's doing the opposite. He's throwing hot potato after hot potato into the lap of the Republican Congress. And he's saying, you made these promises, we made them together, I'm keeping my end, are you going to keep your end? He did it with DACA, the Dreamer program, where he's basically using his leverage over the Dreamers to force the Democrats to go along with immigration restrictions they don't want, probably including the border wall. And now he's doing it with the Iran deal. I think that in the next day or two he is going to decertify the Iran deal, which means he says that he can no longer say that Iran is in compliance, and he can no longer say that the deal is working at stopping Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Once he makes that certification, it goes to Congress automatically, and Congress has 60 days to act on it. But the legislation that results from that cannot be filibustered. It will pass with 51 votes. And Trump is basically saying to Congress, your move, what are you going to do? And Congress will presumably have to reimpose sanctions. And if Congress dithers or takes a middle course, Trump can veto it and can force the sanctions to be reimposed. That will probably force Iran out of the deal, and they'll no longer be under the constraint of not developing a bomb. But by the same token, the United States will be free to reimpose the sanctions and roll the clock back to where it was before Obama gave away the store in that ridiculous deal. And the sanctions that forced Iran to its knees will come back into effect and continue to have that effect on Iran and stop the subsidy of the International Revolutionary Guard and stuff, and terrorism in other countries. So it's wonderful what Trump is doing on Iran.
Dick, Gail Maxey wants to know, what do you think about what Al Green did yesterday in the House? Do you know about what happened in the house?
No, you'll
No?
have to help me out with that. Explain it to me.
Private message me, Gail, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about that tomorrow. And
Now, Trump may be about to make a huge mistake, and I'm hoping that he will avoid it. And I want to talk about it in the hopes that I can help warn him. They announced today, the White House staff, that they were considering inviting Mueller, the special prosecutor, to come to the White House for an interview with Trump. Now, that is a horrible, horrible idea, because you don't have to be under oath. Any statement to a federal official that is not correct is actionable, and you can be indicted for it. There's the crime of perjury, which is lying under oath, and then there's the crime of making false statements to a federal official, which does not require being under oath. That's why if you lie on your income taxes, you can get caught, even though you never swore to it. And if Mueller is going to be invited in to meet with Trump, I guarantee you that what he's going to do is ask Trump a question, and Trump will answer it truthfully, and Mueller will use that as the basis for an indictment, claiming that the answer was obstruction of justice and that it was speaking incorrectly to a federal official. And I'm sure that the questions he would cook up will be so couched as to make it almost impossible for Trump not to fall afoul of that violation. I mean, there may be some naive guys in the White House who are saying, oh, for God's sakes, why don't we just sit down over lunch and dinner and let's work this stuff out. Let's close down this stupid investigation. You haven't found anything. You're not going to find anything. Why waste the time and the taxpayers' money? Let's just do this. We'll settle it between friends. Well, that's like sitting down with a rattlesnake, because Mueller is determined to bring Trump down. That's why he's there. That's what he was paid. That's what he's in effect being paid to do. And if Trump exposes himself by letting there be such an interview, he is just inviting a world of hurt and a world of trouble. So I beg that he doesn't do it. And I'll be continuing making noise on this in a host of different areas, in the hopes that I can penetrate through the White House and that he'll listen. This could be no end of trouble.
Well, Charlotte Claunch Hall says, I think the president's approval rating is so much higher than the polls are showing.
Yes, it is. It's the polls are showing 38 to 40. In fact, it's about 45 when you poll only likely voters. By polling a lot of people that aren't going to vote, you not only dilute the poll, but you involve a lot of people who aren't really literate, aren't interested in politics. Many of them aren't citizens, many of them aren't registered, and they probably are more likely to be Democrats than Republicans. So it skews the polling data. And I think Trump is doing fine in favorability. I think he's cooking around the mid-40s, and that was about his vote share. So I think he's doing great. The issue will be, will he start losing people that voted for him? And so far there's no evidence of that, quite to the contrary.
Nance Long wants to know, what's the status of the Sessions petition?
Well, we submitted it. We had almost 10,000 signatures on it, and we're continuing to press that. I continue to talk about it in my videos and everything else, and we just have to continue our pressure. By the way, Sessions did something pretty good today. One of the big holes in United States immigration law is asylum seeking. Asylum seekers are not immigrants. They're not refugees. Immigrants are people that just want to come here because they want to come here. Refugees are people that say they're coming here because there's a war, there's famine, they're being persecuted, and so on. Asylum seekers say, I'm coming to the United States because if I don't, they're going to kill me. And I've been targeted by a drug gang, a criminal gang, an authoritarian government, and I'm seeking asylum, protection in the United States. Very rare category. And in 2007, there were only 5,000 people who sought asylum in the United States. Then Obama became president, and he decided to use asylum as a method of smuggling more immigrants into the United States who would be dependable Democratic voters. And now 100,000 people a year ask for asylum in the U.S. And they all memorize the key words. This is what Sessions said. They all memorize the key words that they need to be able to meet the legal qualification. The system is being gamed. That's what Sessions said, no doubt about it. The credible fear process, now credible fear of prosecution or persecution or of death, it's called a credible fear. That process was intended to be a lifeline for persons facing serious persecution, but it has become an easy ticket to illegal entry into the United States. Saying a few simple words, I have a legitimate, credible fear of persecution, is now transforming a straightforward arrest and an immediate return into a probable release and hearing if the alien bothers to show up for the hearing. So what happens is the person's led into the United States. He commits a crime here. He kills somebody, robs somebody, rapes somebody. He's adjudicated, he's sentenced to prison, and when he's about to get out of prison, the U.S. moves in and says, okay, we're going to deport you now back to your native country now that you've paid your debt to our society for the crime you committed. And he very often says, oh, but if you send me back, they're going to kill me. I have a credible fear for my life. And there's a special court that hears the case that almost always rubber stamps the application and lets them stay in the United States. And what Sessions is saying is we're going to end that. We're going to restrict it to people who really are asylum seekers and really do have a legitimate fear for their lives. And that's very good. It's a very good move by Sessions. Now, there's one of the things I've been meaning to talk to you about, and I keep forgetting to, is the gay community is busy saying that Trump is discriminating against them, that he's endangering gay rights. And they point to 3 or 4 actions that in fact restrict the rights of transgender people, not of gays, not of lesbians, but of transgender people, people who have changed their sex or changed their life from male to female or vice versa. And the gay groups have set up this coalition, LGBT. No, I'm wrong about it. It's, what is it?
Cute is LGBT.
I don't know. It's L, lesbian, B, bi, G, gay, T, transvestite, transgender. And I don't know what the 5th category is, but
I think it's a Q in there for some reason.
I think people that are undecided. There's male, female, and undecided.
LGBT.
Yeah, LGBT.
Yeah.
Well, the L is fine, and the G is fine, and the and the B is fine. The T, though, is not fine, and they're acting as if violating the T, the transgender, is a fundamental assault on gay rights, and it's not true. So in February, Attorney General Sessions and Education Secretary DeVos rolled back Obama-era guidance that allowed transgender people to use the bathroom which corresponds with their gender identity. So if they were anatomically male, but they said they're female, they could use the ladies' room. Well, Trump rescinded that. Sessions rescinded it. Now, that doesn't affect gay people or lesbians or gay or male gays. It just affects transgender people, and I think it's an appropriate policy. In August, President Trump ordered the Defense Department to stop accepting transgender people in the military, following a series of tweets announcing the policy change. Again, gays can serve in the military, lesbians can, bisexuals can, but not transgender. And that, I think, is appropriate. But the gays are dressing it up as saying, oh, Trump is anti-gay, which is just not true. In fact, I think it's highly commendable that when he issued this order, he's parsing it, and he's saying gays, lesbians, bisexual, all okay, transgender, not, because it poses all sorts of other issues.
There is a Q in there too.
Oh, there is, okay.
Which stands for questioning.
Questioning, yeah.
Questioning their sexual identity.
Like I said, undecided. Last month, the administration filed a Supreme Court brief in support of a Colorado baker who said he shouldn't be forced under a state anti-discrimination law to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Well, that's separate, but I think that's a separate issue. And last week, Sessions reversed course on an Obama-era policy that extended sex discrimination protections in the workplace to transgender people. And he's right for doing that. If you're going to protect transgender people against workplace discrimination, you're going to lead ultimately to affirmative action for transgender people, which will say that you have to encourage the hiring and the retention of transgender people. And I believe that if a employer does not want his workforce to have a group of people who are confused about their sexual identity, I think that's an appropriate thing for him to do. Whereas I think discriminating against a gay person, I think, is not appropriate. And I think Trump has stayed well on that side of the line, and I think they're giving him a bum rap by going after him on it. Now, Trump is also threatening to pull out of NAFTA, North American Free Trade Deal. And that was a big campaign promise of his. The fact about NAFTA, and I was involved in helping to formulate it and get it passed, is that when we passed it, the United States had a relatively even balance of trade with Mexico. I think we sold them $500 million more than we bought from them, or vice versa. Now, we buy from them $70 billion more than we sell to them. And it's a huge source of drain of American jobs. It turns out Ross Perot was right, and Bill Clinton, Al Gore, and I were wrong. There is this giant sucking sound of jobs going over the border, and Trump wants to stop it and wants to renegotiate NAFTA to make it fairer. Part of what he wants to do is to strip the International Court of authority over trade disputes. I don't know if I've told you this story, but it's a shocking one, but an interesting one. You know how we all have tried to protect dolphins, and there was a scare that dolphins were being exterminated? Well, about 4 or 5 years ago, they discovered that the tuna fishermen who use these area nets where they take several square miles of netting and drape it over the ocean and scoop up everything that's within the borders, the parameter of the net, were killing a lot of dolphins. They were catching tuna, and the tuna couldn't escape from the net, but the dolphins couldn't either. And by the time they cut through the net to get to the dolphin, he was dead. And the dolphin population was being really threatened by this. So a bunch of environmental scientists got together and invented a new fishing net that the dolphin could escape from, but the tuna could not. And they went to the fishing fleets and said, please use this instead. And they said, no, it's extra money. We don't want to have to pay for that. Why should we do that? And so the Greens went to the consumer groups and said, why don't you insist that these tuna companies use that special netting? And Starkist and Chicken of the Sea and all of the main Bumblebee, all of the main tuna companies said that they would put a label on the cans if the fishermen used the new nets, saying this is dolphin safe. And if they didn't use the new nets, no label. And people were encouraged to boycott and not buy any tuna can that did not have dolphin safe written on it. And if you go look at the cans in your fridge or your pantry, I think you'll see dolphin safe written on them. Well, Mexico sued under NAFTA and said we're too poor to make our fishermen buy these new nets. And by requiring it by consumer boycotting, it's an unfair trade practice, and we want it outlawed. And the court with that jurisdiction complied. They ruled in Mexico's favor. And now these labels are coming off these cans, and the bad nets are making a return, and dolphins will soon once again be endangered, not because of an American court, not because of an American elected official or even an appointed official, but a court set up by NAFTA, an international court, to adjudicate that. And we have no appeal. We can't appeal it. We can't reverse it by legislation. We can't do anything about it. We just have to obey. And Trump is saying that's ridiculous. That's bad policy. The United States shouldn't be involved in it. Now, I personally believe that Trump is negotiating. You know, you read The Art of the Deal. Trump always says, start out with an inflexible, unbelievably strong position and scare the hell out of the other guy. And then he'll get more reasonable and you can actually cut a deal. And I think that's what Trump is doing. But it's possible that he's not. It's possible that Trump will just pull out of NAFTA, which would hurt the United States in some areas, help the United States in others, hurt Mexico all over the place, might encourage more illegal immigration. One of the reasons that immigration is down is that the Mexican economy is doing pretty well. So we'll have to follow that and see where he takes us.
Well, Anna Teal Strange asks, regarding Trump's tax plan, what is the definition of the middle class salary bracket? And also, Darlene Meyer Rubin wanted to know what your thoughts are on the tax plan.
Okay. The tax plan is particularly aimed at doubling the standard deduction. And that will mainly affect people whose household income is above $30,000, but below about $75,000, and that really is the band that we're talking about. Above $75,000, the personal deduction would still be increased, but most people in that bracket itemize their returns, and therefore they don't use the standard deduction. And if they're richer than that, they're not allowed to use the standard deduction. And if they're poorer than 30, they probably pay no income tax now, so it doesn't matter to them what the deduction is. But this is very important. It's going to take about 15% of the country, about 30 million people, and is going to free them from having to pay federal income taxes at all. And that's its overwhelming impact. Now, there is some concern that there are a few million people who, because of the way the brackets interface, might have to pay 2 or 3% more. But I think that'll be taken out of the bill when it passes, because nobody wants to do that. Now, the tax bill as a whole, I think, would be a gigantic jolt for the American economy. When you look back at the 2 periods of real prosperity that we had, well, let's expand it, the 3 periods of real prosperity we've had since 1960, all 3 were caused by huge tax cuts. Kennedy and Johnson cut the income tax from 90% to 50%. And that triggered a wave of consumer spending and made the 1960s an incredible era of prosperity. By the time the 70s came around, it was a little too much and it triggered hyperinflation. But in the 60s, it was incredible. Then Reagan came in and cut taxes significantly, cutting that top bracket down, I think, to 30%. And that occasioned tremendous economic growth. And the 80s were an incredible period in which everybody's income went up. And now Trump is going to do the same thing. And I think he's going to usher in 5 to 10 years of prosperity and make America permanently more competitive. You look at the world, the industrialized world, Japan, Western Europe, and the United States and Canada, and you realize that if we have the lowest tax rate of any of them, except maybe for Poland, that I think now has the lowest, everybody's going to come here. Everybody's going to gravitate to here. I don't mean illegal immigrants. I mean rich people will move here. Investors will come here. Enterprises will come here. Jobs will come here because they'd rather pay fewer taxes than more taxes. Newt Gingrich once told me, if you want more of something, tax it less. And if you want less of something, tax it more. And this is a great example of that. And I think you're going to see an unbelievable economic change in America if we adopt this tax change. Now, people are going to say you're raising the deficit, but that's just temporary. In fact, Reagan and Clinton and Kennedy and Johnson didn't really increase the deficit much. It went up and then it went down when the increased tax revenues from this increased economic activity finally kicked in. And that was a very significant thing. Bill Clinton balanced the budget largely on the strength of the Reagan tax cuts cutting in and also some of the cuts that he put in as well.
Thomas Hillebrand wants to know, what made Rand Paul jump on board with Trump's executive order today?
Well, I would hesitate to ever say what makes Rand Paul do anything. But he has been fairly consistent and pure in saying that he just wanted to eliminate Obamacare. He didn't want to replace it. He didn't want to reform it. He just wanted it gone because he didn't think the federal government had any business meddling in health care or premiums. So what Trump's actions do is they loosen the grip of Obamacare, and that's something that Rand Paul undoubtedly would approve of.
And Dorothy Hild, I believe she lives in Canada, and she wants to know what you think of Trudeau.
I think Trudeau's a nice boy. I don't think he's very mature. I think that he just got elected on his father's name, and I think he's caught between a country that wants him to be more conservative and his family impulse to be liberal, and I don't think that he's a heavyweight at all.
And Kathy Schultz Chapman asks, what happened to the military transgender ban?
It's in effect. It's not. Maybe it hasn't been imposed yet, but it's going to be imposed. There's probably litigation over it, but that's not going to prevail. And it's happening. When you sit back and you look at the things Donald Trump promised, every single thing that he promised is happening. We're cutting back on illegal immigration. We're going to build the wall. We're going to reform NAFTA. We're getting rid of Obamacare. We're loosening the restraints on the police. In almost every area, Donald Trump is keeping his campaign promises. It's unbelievable. And frankly, I'm a little concerned. I don't know how the various deep state actors that I think have taken over the White House with Bannon out, how Trump has been able to keep his momentum so clearly focused on his program. I think one of the answers to that is a friend of mine named Steve Mueller, who's a young kid. I think he's 34 or something. And he's been one of the prime architects of the agenda. He and I worked together on it during the campaign, and I think he's now proceeding to implement it. But it's basically Donald Trump believes in what he said and is determined to deliver on it.
And Marianne Hendrick asked this yesterday, what about all the Native American protests on the fracking?
Well, there were protests about fracking from a variety of sources, most of them ginned up by liberal environmental groups. Their concept, what they say, is that you're polluting the water supply, that when you push chemicals into the ground to shatter the rock, it gets into the water supply and it's dangerous. Now that is absurd. It's laughable. What happens with fracking is that you pile a pile driver 5,000 feet down into the earth, and you shatter the rocks way down there. The water table is 10 feet from the surface. You access it in a well, and to think that you can come through 5,000 feet of solid rock and somehow pollute that water supply is absurd. The EPA has even said that isn't happening. Now, there are a couple of legitimate concerns about fracking that aren't that important but need to be addressed. One is that a lot of these companies, some of these companies, were leaving the chemicals they were using to go down and frack in open containers on the ground, and that some of it evaporated, went into the clouds, and came down in the form of acid rain. And they've now stopped that. They're not doing that anymore. Other people are concerned that there needs to be disclosure of what chemicals are being used. And I guess there does, but there is no point in it because the chemicals aren't doing anything. The fracking is down here and the water is up here, and there's non-porous rock in between. I always like to tell the story of upstate New York versus mid-state Pennsylvania. You compare communities in New York like Utica, Rome, Albany, Troy, Schenectady, Binghamton, Rochester. They're all sinking into poverty. They all have huge job loss. They've all lost more than half of their population, and they have no economic future. And they are being protected from fracking by Governor Andrew Cuomo standing up on behalf of the environmental lobbyists and impoverishing his own people. On the other hand, a few miles away, in outstate Pennsylvania, the area between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, in areas like Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Harrisburg, and Gettysburg, Altoona, Johnstown, those areas are thriving. People are becoming rich overnight there because their land has oil through fracking, and the money is flowing into that community, and it is an incredible success story. And what's the difference between the prosperity in California, in Pennsylvania, and the poverty in New York? Governor Andrew Cuomo, who wants to run for president, and he wants the Greens to support him, and he's taking this outrageous position that is single-handedly consigning about a quarter of a state to poverty. It's outrageous.
Well, there's a question about fracking, but I just want to interject. Dr. Catherine Duplantis wrote in that she thinks Dr. Rand Paul liked the fact that the executive order pushed health associations. Also, it allows one to buy across the lines of the states.
Yeah, they're both in good provisions.
Yes. And Lorraine Blair asks, and I've heard other people ask this, Dick, does fracking cause more earthquakes?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's nothing connected with that.
Okay.
It's not on any of these belts. Earthquakes are caused at certain specific places on Earth where the geodetic plates intersect. That causes mountain ranges, one goes over the other, valleys, one goes under the other. But in the middle, there's nothing, that's not an earthquake. If you frack along a geodetic fault line, maybe there could be some impact, but not really.
Dick, a lot of people are asking to make your show an hour long. They love it so much. But William Brown wants to know, will authorities get their hands on Wasserman's computer?
Yeah, they have to. They have to investigate this Pakistani guy. And because God knows what this guy did. Now, because it's not an hour-long show. First, I want to thank you for sharing and ask you to continue to share. My program is growing. It makes it worthwhile to do it, and I would appreciate it if you would share as you come on. First, I want to shout out for being so actively involved in my live videos and for supporting and sharing my videos and my page. Darlene Meyer-Rubin, Jack Tapper, Frank Beerfan, Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, and Brittany Pearson, mother of the future president of the United States, 9-year-old Jack Pearson, who recently had a birthday. Happy birthday, Jack. And the selfie of the day is David Dean, and his photo with his holding the book Rogue Spooks will be posted on today's Deep Six show.
Yes.
That email thing we didn't
Yes,
do
I
yet?
did set up an email.
Oh, good.
So I didn't post it on your page yet.
But
if
do you
want,
know it?
I know my email.
The new one.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is a special offer for Christmas. Between now and Christmas, if you would like me to send you free a book plate with my signature on it and your name on it, you know, Dear Jack, Happy Birthday, or Merry Christmas, Dick Morris, that you could then paste into Rogue Spooks. Please don't order it unless you have bought a copy of Rogue Spooks. Can't check up on you, but I trust you. But if you want me to send you a book plate like that to put in the book Rogue Spooks, please email Renee at this special email address, which is
rnevins, that's RNEVINS, rnevins for Dick Morris at yahoo.com.
FOR.
Yep, rnevins, FOR, dickmorris@yahoo.com.
Okay, you're posting that on the
I'll
side,
post it
right?
on here, yes.
Okay, and I'll repeat it frequently. So again, it's R. Nevins, Nevins, FORDICKMORRIS. I'm glad I don't have a longer name. At what?
Yahoo.com.
Yahoo. Okay, good. Thanks very much. Nice talking to you.